Hi, everybody. This is Ken Mugrage. Thank you for joining another episode of the Thoughtworks Technology Podcast. Kind of a cool thing today. The few of us are here in our Thoughtworks Berlin office talking about AI for software development and a bunch of things. So we set up a little bit of a cage match that people that you think, I don't know, have some controversy between them, but it turns out they actually like each other. So what we're going to talk today about is empowering the citizen developer and what we can do to make both sides actually win if there are sides. So got two great guests today. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. I'll ask Scott Davies first.
Hi, I'm Scott Davies. I'm head of tech for Thoughtworks Europe.
Hi, I'm Christopher Hastings. I'm a global tech product lead.
So basically what we have here is Christopher runs a lot of our research around AIFSD. And as such, correct me if I'm wrong, prototypes like lots of applications and things like that. But you don't consider yourself a developer.
I am not a developer. My background in being a developer is I took one Python class and the rest of it has been what can I Google, throw up in a Jupyter notebook and kind of survive from there. If you ask me about anything more complicated than that, I make Scott angry.
Yeah. And so, as a head of technology, you're kind of responsible for some of our technical quality and that sort of thing. There's the phrases that people throw out like shadow IT and those types of things. Does that scare you?
No, not at all, actually. We get along well. For me, software is all about feedback, right? It's the feedback loops, getting them as short as possible. We've done it from unit tests, CI/CD. We always concentrate, how do I get around that loop quicker and quicker and get closer and closer to building the right thing? This is helping us do it together, right?
So how? I mean, if he's off in a corner doing something, and then, how do you getting that feedback? And how's it helping you?
Particularly in the space of like prototyping things. These are great tools now and great tool chains. We'll talk probably about tool chains in a bit, but now we're in a situation where you can iterate and build something that you can show somebody in minutes, right? That used to take, for a fidelity like prototype, that would take days normally, but like, you and I can riff on something now. You can show me quick, give me a bit of feedback. I can talk to you about some other things and we can go again, right? And we can just keep going around that like really quickly. And that used to take so long. And it also required like lots of synchronous time from both of us.
As a product manager, one of the things that I'm trying to do to communicate about if I'm effective in my role is not just being able to talk to whoever our user or customer is about what it is they want to build and why. It's also to understand on the other side of the table, what's your job? What tools are you using? How do you work? How do they play? And the last thing on the planet I would rather do is to go read documentation about how to get something working. But I do need to understand those tools. I need to be able to see how they work and have a mental model of that.
Yeah, and the same coming the other way, right? I need to understand what goals you're trying to achieve and what you're trying to do, your business process, your interactions, all those things. But that shouldn't be a barrier to us getting going. So I think this is a way of you showing me something far quicker. We can iterate and go back. We can talk about how we can make it, enterprise grade. We can put the guardrails in place. We can do all that. And we can get the corporate look and feel and all those other things.
But we're still talking about the happy case, right? Yeah. The happy case being you and I can get on the same page. But I think there is a bleeding edge and that we are rapidly coming into, whereas me having prototyping tools or access to however that looks like causes problems for people on the technical side of things, because I come back and without the understanding of depth, I come back and say, hey, I made this thing. It took me 15 minutes. Why is it taking you guys so long?
Yeah.
Or, hey, I've done this, just make it like that. And you go, turns out you actually don't know how to design anything. And I go, but I see it. Yeah. And from my limitations of understanding from my role, I'm a bit more technical than many.
What are the things he needs to be aware of that, this is a developer that does think, I can just launch this on my own now.
Well, I think there's a whole bunch of facets, right? There's the security angle, who has access to data, how you control it, should you be updating it, should it go beyond the boundaries of our organization? Are you using tools that are outside the corporate boundary? Is our data leaking out? All those kind of things, usual privacy concerns. Then there's the corporate standards. We've got a glossary. We've got a main language that we use interchangeably. Like if we're going to use the tool or whatever across the enterprise, it shouldn't be your language for things. It should be our language for things. It's got this. We all agree that's an order. If it doesn't have this, it's not an order. Right. Okay, great. And I think the other thing is understanding how it fits in with the rest of the IT estate. So for example, you built a tool and it's great, but if it updates something and you expect something to happen in another system, we need to consider how that's going to happen as well and what the transfer of data is.
So what's that process look like? I mean, you mentioned guardrails and things like that. Is that supported by, the other thing you mentioned was tool chain. Is that supported by part of the tool chain? Is that a manual you're checking boxes? What's that look like? How do we help people?
When we talk about these things, I think where we're at right now with certainly the types of tools that you're using are evolving at an incredible rate. There's a new kid on the block every few days, right? And from an enterprise perspective, that's interesting because you've got how do we update this tool that you built in 6 months' time? And some of the tool chains are quite fragile. You might have used 3 or 4 different tools and taken something that ChatGPT splurted out and put it into something else to generate prompt for something else, to put in a tool that's developed an app for you. It's from a technologist background, I'm like, how do I recreate that? How do I make sure that we've not just generated something that's a one-off? Right? So what I want to do is work together with you, and we'll work out how to do that. You might show me the app. It's a tool for understanding, isn't it? Right? I want to understand your business process, how you work. I think traditionally what we've done, we spent a lot of time building systems for people and expecting them to adapt the ways they work to the way the system works. And we talk a lot about that and how that's wrong. Users, people have a goal and an objective to complete, right? And sometimes these systems get in the way. So having the feedback from you that this is how you need to work is an opportunity. It's not like a threat from that bit. But what we do need to do is work out the guardrails around data, security, ownership, life cycle of the app. And that's where we need to work together.
The best life cycle of an app for me in my world is 0 days. I don't want to maintain something. I don't want to think about security. I don't want to think about guardrails. If you ask me about security, I'm not going to even know where to begin. There's things in this experience that are dangerous for me. One is a good example of MCPs. There's an XKCD comic that I remember. The entire internet is built with all these building blocks, and down on the right corner is this one thing that is a package maintained by a single individual. For me, I go, okay, cool. But those, from what my brief understanding of security is that's also tons of vulnerabilities. Now I have the ability to call MCPs, download them anywhere. It's like popping to GitHub and saying, oh, this MCP that all I have to do is apparently drop in this very easy interface magically can do the thing I want. And now it's on my local machine. It has a lot of the permissions that I would have access to, and suddenly I don't even know, right? But I'm going to just go and Google and Claude and other things, and to a certain extent, I don't want you to know that I'm here, right? As it says in there, I'm like, I don't want to start figuring out how do I green light stuff because I'm trying to create and prototype. And
we go back a little bit. You don't have to go back too far to think about there was the shadow IT thing, right?
Yeah.
So I don't view this as shadow IT because shadow IT was people's response to the IT department not being responsive enough. It was their way of getting shit done and just getting on with things. This isn't that. This is a tool for communicating and for us to interact and get to where you need to get to, right? To support you and the outcomes you need for the business. So the quicker we can do that, the better it can be, because as you say, your concerns are different. We've talked about security. We've talked about a few other things. There's cost as well, right? To the organization.
That's what I actually wanted to get to. And in a little bit of a role reversal, Christopher, just because of your particular position, you actually were part of the teams that manage which tools to look at and so forth and control some of the API keys. Scott had a situation where he was trying a new tool and he ran out of credits before he even actually started the app. How do people manage that?
I think there's going to be a couple of long-term strategies that we're seeing that are effective, but right now, a lot of what we're doing is just relying on what the back end for the tool is. Within Anthropic, they have something right now set up where you can set it up within workspaces and they manage it and you just kind of dump people in and say, hey, here's what you've got. Now, there have been a couple moments where a single person can say, and use Opus and run up those credits and take it for everybody else. In which case we say, all right, number 1, you were warned. Number 2, you're now quarantined. And number 3, you're out. That's kind of how that works. So you do have to be careful on it because I'm not going to understand what does a token cost really look like. What would help people in my role or people like me who have less familiarity is if there was a better concept of what does my design workflow need to look like? Maybe for another podcast, there's a conversation about if you're going from user experience to designing user workflows to designing prototypes, and now I have a dev, and that's sort of a design tool chain. But I think there's also another workflow for people that are designing things that are much more back end, where you still have users and customers, though, where it looks something like I start in Claude Code, I have a massive design chat, and I mean design in the strategic sense rather than something with UI. I have this chat, figure out what I want, I try and break it down to the right requirements. requirements and prompts and things like that. And then later pop over and go to some other tool to then develop the code itself. And how do I make sure that I'm using the tokens in the right way rather than trying to build the whole enchilada? I'm from Texas. That's sort of phrase we use, right? Building the whole thing in one shot and say, all right, let me try this. And now, oh, that didn't work. Let me try it again and build the whole thing. Like there is a iterative, project-centric thin slicing that has to occur.
And we need to work together on things like data as well, right? Because you're not just going to, in the enterprise, just say, right, we open up every data source there is, just so that we encourage people to do this kind of development. Other people might be using that. You might be slowing down the website. It might be all these other things. So we need to put the guardrails in place. We need to work together. And I can help you identify the sources of data as well. You wouldn't necessarily know where they are in the organization, right? So,
but I think there is a place where it does start to blend over into almost shadow IT. There may be an upskilling path to say, how do you better create a developer out of someone like me who literally has one Python class, hates reading documentation, and doesn't even know necessarily at times where to begin with the rich history of what Thoughtworks has brought to the table. I don't know where to begin. And I don't know that I should. How do I then do things in the right way, hand it off at the right time? I just want to just create something in a lab that can maybe get 3 other people's, 5 or 10 other people's feedback to go, this is great and useful, and then go knock on somebody's door and say, can you make this nice and shiny?
So he's done a proof of concept. You now understand what he's trying to do. Yeah. Are you taking his code and...
The first bit is the communication of the idea, right? And the intent and the output that you want or the outcome. It's taking that, I need to go away and identify where the data comes from, do all that kind of stuff, and what's the impact in the integration and all the other systems. But I'm going to look at exactly what you've done, and we're going to get designers to look at the screens. We're going to get them made, the way that fits in with our corporate brand and everything else. But it doesn't mean I'm going to 100% take your code, right?
In fact, I've got an example of that. So the idea from the door metrics being like the mean time to value, right? And I think there's something else here, and I'm not suggesting this be like an official metric. It's like mean time to shared understanding. And that's really what I want to reduce because, I had a development team I was working with. I'm very familiar with concepts behind AI. I know things about model training and how to fine tune. And I know how you can use prompts and build MCPs and things around that. I was working with some developers that didn't have as much more modern experience as I did because I get really addicted and they're onboarding and people are trying to upskill and all the time, but they didn't have the same shared understanding that I did about this is what I want. This is what I think it can do. This is how I think it can do it. And I found myself struggling to communicate that. And for what was meant to be a quick and dirty prototype to start our thin slicing and sort of build up that value, I didn't feel like they were getting me. I'm putting this on my ability to communicate rather than their ability to understand, just to be clear. So I'm not trying to throw anybody on the bus. And so I literally woke up at 4:30 one morning and I said, I've got to do this better. And I hopped on with Claude. I created a virtual environment with a Jupyter notebook. And already I'm further down this chain than some product people, right? But I said, all right, let me just create these two, grab an API key that I've got. And I'm not doing secrets management. I'm doing this very, very poorly. And I'm just saying, all right, now let me put this all in Jupyter notebook cells and build out this workflow so I can describe the experience and prototype the experience so that by the time I get down to here are my requirements, here are my NFRs, here's the test cases, I've played with it enough that I know that I'm asking real IT people, not me, for what I want because I don't even know that. And I'm doing my best, but I'm going to be wrong.
And you don't know the architectural decisions I've made, right? About how we're going to run, what languages we support and operate, what skills we've got. You talked a bit about this, what's the handover? Where does that happen? You want this to live, right? You don't want this to be hey, work this week, and you come to me next week and say, Scott, it's not working.
On the second part of that was that I went to the team and I said, here's what I've made. And they said, you did that. And I said, well, Claude and I, right? My buddy Claude. And they said, okay, but you did that. And I said, yeah. And they went, I've never seen in prototyping done in quite this way, like this, by someone who was not in a developer role. They said, one, that's amazing. The second question was, do I have to use your code? Because I don't know anything about how to structure it and principles of things like clean code and other things. I understand the concept, right? You want your code readable, but I'm not going to tell you the most elegant, compute efficient way to structure that. I just wanted it to work to illustrate, can this be what I have, right?
And it's not going to have the tests in it, the unit tests and all the automation that we expect. But what you can start to bake in, which I find really valuable, are examples. Goko Adzik talks about example-driven development. Give me an example of what it looks like in the real world. Oh, an order number looks like that. Oh, it's got hyphens in it. I didn't realize it had hyphens in it. Or it's 8 digits. Oh, that's a letter at the end. Giving real examples you can give without waiting for the system that give me examples. And I can start to construct tests from those as well. Because then when I show it to you, does it work for the orders that I have? Oh yeah, look, Wow. Okay.
So we mentioned a little bit earlier about guardrails, and Christopher used the trigger word of API keys. Give our listeners some concrete examples of guardrails that you can put in that they should be doing in their enterprise to make sure that things like authentication keys aren't leaking out. What are some concrete things that our folks can take into work tomorrow?
Wow, that's a big list.
It's a big list.
So there's like keys in general. You don't want a shared key, for example, that's used for lots of different things, because then typically what happens is somebody assigns it higher permissions than it needs to have. And then you get all sorts of things happening that shouldn't happen. There's no like traceability then when something goes wrong, what's broken. You might pass on the key to your friend. All these things can happen. And, we spent a lot of time thinking about the security posture of the enterprise. It's not something we want to compromise. We still want to go fast. We still want to get feedback. We still want to do all these things.
You guys are familiar with the idea of a minimum viable product. Is there not some version of a minimum viable product for citizen developers, is the phrase we've been using to describe some of my role? Is there not something like that exists that says, here's how you do management of your environment variables, here's how you set it, here's how you change it, here's how you get access to it, here's how you set up a virtual environment? These sort of like basic, if you get these 4 things right, this covers 80% of the scenarios that we need for security and privacy that are non-malicious.
And that's where I was wondering, we were talking earlier offline, honestly, with Scott about empowering, not just helping and being happy about it, but actually empowering the citizen developer. Are there things you can give them that are already the framework or the scaffolding?
There's no reason why I can't give you that, or I couldn't give you like mock data that we've got somewhere else, or perhaps we've got like a test environment, and I can share with you the data model from that environment and explain to you a bit about how it works. You get out of it what you want, and you say, hey, where's this? And signpost where that is. And at the same time, we talk a lot about sensible defaults, and we talk about it in the development space for like, these are expectations that we all have of each other. When we come together about ways of working, we can extend those things, right? And we can provide guides that help you, do what you need to do without getting in the way. We can then double check. I can come and talk to you and say, hey, have you done this? Have you looked about where the keys come from or the data access that you need? And we can have a discussion, right? They're placeholders for a discussion. And I think that's really important.
Are there things you need from me? As a citizen developer, I want to produce things regularly, and I want to be able to take it back to delivery teams to at least do a proof of concept, or maybe to scale within the organization to some degree, not necessarily like a massive production thing, because not my wheelhouse. What do you need from me?
I could give you the style guide that we have for the organization. So at least the things that you produce look like the rest of the things that we have.
Is that for the code? Is that, tell me what a style guide would do for me.
When you produce these prototypes, they look like the rest of the organizational ones, the right branding, the logos in the right space, fonts are the right size.
Why is that important? I think I know, but for our audience, you're like, well, I just want the form to be right. But why is that important?
I think it's important not from like you said before, right? I'm not going to 100% use what you've given me, but it sets the expectation about how it's going to work, and it will help with communication, because somebody needs to make sure, hey, is that going to work on a mobile? Yeah, I love your design. You've got 400 things on the screen. We need to break that down because on a mobile, that won't work. So, using the style guide, you'll at least get all the different size formats that we support, the rotation, all those things.
I hear you, but I don't want to. And the reason that I'm saying that is because I'm just trying to get across a simple concept. And then the moment you ask me to do a style guide, I go, I don't know how to plug it in. I don't know, if it's a import style guide.
We will help you do that.
But even then, I feel like then I'm moving out of my lane of just trying to discover and communicate what is valuable to build. And so for me, I go, I don't want to. If there is almost one-click solutions that can give me what in other language I've heard described as like a design system, how do I import that into whatever I'm doing, and whether that's code designs and what people are doing with agents. But to a certain extent, I'm going to go, I don't care. I can't care because I don't have the wisdom to know where that domain boundary is, where I go down, and I'm going to get frustrated, and it's going to keep me from doing my regular job. I'm doing what I feel like is trying to do yours.
Yeah, you're trying to like go through that innovation bubble. You're trying to like quickly get an idea across or show something and get back to your day job. Okay, yeah, so I get that.
That said, right, I'm going to argue against myself now, perhaps. I do think there is something that is there about how do we make sure that we can still make it easy to hand off to you, right? And so internally to Thoughtworks, we have done some really cool work around design systems and using those in some of these prototyping. And I think there's a lot of other apps that are relying on those same kind of things. So I feel like it's almost like, is there a wish list that I should have? And then in that wish list, how do I make it easy for me to pick up within certain tool stacks?
Depends on what tool stack you're using, obviously, but we can do things like accelerators. We can give you prompts that start a point that already drags in the design system, all the other assets we have. Maybe it can include like all the domain terms that we use in our business, so that there's no, we call this a A and you call it a B. The other thing I think I'd be really interested in when I come and talk to you is, this is great, you've done this thing. What else in our organization does it interact with? Or who? The thing that you've done, does it relate to somebody in accounts? Does it do things? What's the workflow? Where does this data go? What do you need to happen after or before? What are the constraints around what we're trying to do? That's the discussion we need to go through when we have this wonderful sharing moment. We're aligned, right? We're on the same page now about what you're trying to achieve. You're telling me a bit about the process and your ways of working.
Y'all want to work together, but it's not a silver bullet. There are, and I think there's an expectation among some folks. Hype is hype, but there's an expectation that, hey, we just get these tools and it's magic and everyone's happy. I mean, there's still work to be done around understanding, right? And where are the lines?
But in the past, this would have taken, for you to like share with me, would have taken a long time, right? To get to the level of understanding, like you said, the minimum shared understanding, right, would have taken probably weeks. We can probably get there in a couple of iterations in days, right, or hours. So I think that's the advancement, is that the communication sharing bit is where we're really at right now. And obviously we're exploring AI FSD usage at the code level, but I think this is kind of the emerging bit now.
Christopher, you mentioned, and I know this, you're more technical than a lot of product managers and so forth, but for the product managers that are listening, how did they get started? I mean, I see people trying a different tool every week and they never kind of get good with any of them. And does it matter very much? I mean, how do people start?
My short answer would be, I'll kick part of this over to Scott. My short answer is, go get a subscription to Claude, get your organization to give you the subscription so you have the chat interface interaction, because that has been a key unlock. And I say this for a couple of reasons, and for both that path and that tool. The path is because if you are doing it at an organization level, or if you opt out, as I understand the rules have changed recently, if you do those two things, you can then say, don't train on my data. That checks the boxes for Scott around security. Fantastic. Now, the second piece of that is that it has so many built-in prototype visualization tools automatically that I can do it. It will write code and then show it to me what it looks like. And so I can do that to then generate and say, oh, let me iterate here, let me iterate here, quickly do this in a way that is natural language for me without me needing to know anything about API keys, environmental variables, or anything else like that. So that would be my starting place.
I agree. I think it's like, the barrier to you sharing some of that shouldn't be having to learn Figma. You shouldn't have to learn a tool that feels really unfamiliar and has got sharp edges. Like you say, natural language. You can build up as well. I think whatever tools you use, you need to be able to build up. You need to okay, I've given you something, you show me something, it's like not quite what I wanted. I'll build on that. I'll give you a bit more information and you can go around that loop quicker. I think those are the things. You don't want to spend hours learning a tool. Yes, we can all go on YouTube and watch how to use video for a bit, for an hour or whatever, but you don't want to do that every time a new tool comes out, right? But if the model of interaction for you to get what you want is natural language, that's going to be a lot easier. And you can use it when the tooling changes, right? You can save those independently of the tool if you want. They all save them anyway, but if you want to get out of that tool and go somewhere else.
The one piece of advice that I would offer for anybody on models is that they've got a couple of different types. You've got reasoning models, Anthropic, and you've got Opus. But if you got ChatGPT, you've got GPT-5 and all these others. I would say at first blush, don't believe that a bigger model is going to magically solve the problem that you're going to address. There's something in prompting called one-shot prompting, multi-shot, trying to figure that out. I think as a product person, it is take your thinnest slice, try to illustrate one concept that you think is at the core of what you want to be able to visualize, and then evolve. And then when you hit a wall, which you will hit, honestly, the best practical advice is ask Claude to say, hey, tell me where I'm at, rewrite a prompt for me to get me to where I am. Now that you and I have had our back and forth and we've chatted through our requirements, give me a new prompt, kill it, start a new chat, and fire it up. Because otherwise, you start to get degradation because context windows get too big and everything else. So it's like practically that's the other place that I would start.
I guess for closing, I'm going to put you both in a spot a little bit and ask you to assume identities. Because the truth is, we work for a company we develop software. And so regardless of what your role is, our thing is developing software. That's not the case for all of our listeners. Some of them are banks. Pretend that, you're a product manager that's not doing software development related products and that you're an IT person that doesn't trust an accountant to write software. What's the one thing you want the accountant, I'll start with Scott. What's the one thing you want the accountant to know that's going to help them take better advantage of this?
I think some of it's expectation, Ryan. It comes back to what you say. I would say, don't accept the first thing that comes back, right? Go around again, iterate, try something different, ask a question in a different way, prompt in a different way, and try and get some different things, right? Again, you will find all of these tools. It's very easy as well to get distracted. Don't get me wrong, right? You can end up down some great rabbit holes. But I think trying to describe what you're trying to achieve in several different ways and refining, like you said, you go through this kind of mode of refining the interaction. And then you get to a point where you think, I'm good enough now. Can I compact all this and get it into a succinct message? It's like giving a presentation, right? When you need to tell people what you're going to tell them, you tell them, and you tell them what you already told them, right? But each of those is at a different fidelity.
And then, Christopher, I know you have a background in education and economics, so you're that banker. Why is it so important to you to get this stuff out fast? What do you need from him?
Well, one, what I hear Scott describing is diving deep into prompt engineering, and there's some resources we can link to that can help people who are getting started. Quite honestly, I need to know that there's a stance in the organization that they're there to help me do my job, because typically the experience of somebody who's on the other side of it is that it's going to take way too long to get my ticket responded to. It's not really going to be helpful. They're going to deny and recycle for the smallest little thing. And so IT does not seem like a friendly organization. And I honestly don't want them to know I'm even doing anything. And the biggest analogy that I've got to what I think we've seen, right? Everything, history repeats itself. Everything we've already seen, we're seeing now, we've already seen before. I think the biggest in-organization development of that is the way people use Microsoft Excel. That is citizen developers bypassing dashboards, bypassing a data organization to send information around and change it. And so I think we're going to see a lot of the same patterns there.
I don't want to go back to shadow IT. I want to enable you. I need to be there. I need to be on the front foot because this is going to happen. We need to embrace it.
It's funny, people, I think, assume that a company like Thoughtworks would be afraid of this. It sounds like we still need each other.
It goes all the way back, doesn't it, to the Agile Manifesto, right? I'd rather have interactions than big documents, things like that.
Yeah.
Feedback's the most valuable thing. The more we do of that, the more we understand each other, the quicker we get to results.
I want to go back. I want to talk about the Agile Manifesto for a second. One of the counter trends that we're seeing here, we want to be agile. We want to be user responsive. We want to be able to collect feedback. And we're trying to move away from what was waterfall development and the horrors of we have to document everything. The flip side of that I'm seeing is that we have to get everything right into a prompt in order to get it to generate things the right way. How do we face that as helping different developers? I think there's something there, and I didn't want to, the Agile Manifesto triggered it, but I don't know that this is the conversation for it.
We don't necessarily work in pairs of the same role. So why don't I take the same approach? I'll come pair with you. I'll help you understand where I'm coming from. You can help me understand what you're trying to achieve. We'll get closer and closer, and we'll get there quicker. We will get there quicker. I don't think you have to bear the brunt, and I don't have to bear the brunt of receiving something that's thrown over the wall, right? Because that's what nobody wants. And I don't want to go back to the shadow IT thing. So let's embrace it. Let's get together. Let's do this. We can now do this in days and hours, not months, weeks. Hopefully as well, you're going to knock on my door again next time, as opposed to I'm not speaking to those guys again.
We are IT. We'll find a way to make them unhappy. I want to thank you both. I know, as I mentioned at the start, we've had a long week of meetings this week. They've been energizing and tiring at the same time. So I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to our listeners.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Ken.